But when we consider neurodivergency and that some people, their brains just think different and their bodies process senses different. Just like how you were saying with like being hyperactive and then being around other kids and like seeing how like they're so hyperactive. It's normal for kids to act like that anyway, but for some kids, it's literally a thing like they can't control it, like they can't regulate. And so it's like, are they being disrespectful or do they just need help with the support to
archipelago sharp as a stencil, like volcanoes, magma in the temple, hype crew yelling, the sound monumental. Pulse of Polynesia, to the rhythm, hit the road. Pulse of Polynesia.
On the subject of mental illness, I do think it's important to help viewers understand that there is a difference between mental illness and something that is called neurodivergency. And so what neurodivergency is if we look at the average brain, right? So studies have shown like doctors will take brains and they study them and they study how they're created and the process of the chemicals that happen and how they absorb information and how it controls the body and all that stuff, right? And so the average brain thinks and processes information a certain way. And so people who have the average brain, they'll be known as a typical thinker or like a neurotypical. Whereas neurodivergency, so divergence means different and neuro means the brain, right? Or how you think. And so neurodivergency is addressing the brains that don't think the same or process information the same way that a typical thinker would. And so what this looks like, these would be people considered diagnoses that we know that are like autism and ADHD and bipolar disorder and Tourette's and things like that. And so there's a very big difference between neurodivergence and mental illness, because neurodivergence, it's just the way that your brain was created and how it processes information. But mental illness is there is something wrong with your brain and the chemicals and the way that things are happening inside of you. And neurodivergence, you can't change. But mental illness, there are supports and solutions to help resolve mental illness and to improve it. And the way I like to think about it is like if we compare it to like our body and like our physical experiences, right? Physically, we get sick, so that's a physical illness. But we can resolve it with like medications or rehab or exercise or eating healthier, all those things. And so the same with mental illness, we can resolve it by putting in support systems to ourselves, whether that it looks like there could be many different ways that we could support it. If it's like surrounding ourselves with positive energy, speaking better to ourselves, loving ourselves, right? Being around people who love us too, or involving ourselves in hobbies that are beneficial for our health, like going out on walks, riding bikes, things like that, whatever you like, connecting with nature, whatever. So I just wanted to point that out too, just because especially with the high rates in suicide that our communities experience, it's due to the lack of supporting their mental health. And what happens is they have a mental illness and they have a sickness. And then that's why the consequence of that is suicide. The thing about neurodivergency is that because people think differently and because they don't always have the right support systems in place, they're at higher risk of having mental health issues. But it doesn't mean that they're automatically born with a mental illness, because there's ways to still like help and support them. But I just thought that maybe that would be beneficial and important for the audiences watching to hear and to learn about that, because I think it's something important that we could implement as people to each other, is understanding that there are people that think differently. And I think, like I talked about before, us like being so communal and that being like a root pillar of everything that we are, we expect people to behave a certain way and meet the same standards that everybody else is doing and to do things like traditional or what's culturally acceptable. And if anybody behaves or goes out of the norm, then it's like, oh, shame. It's like so that they're doing that. That's disrespectful. You can't be acting like that, things like that. But when we consider neurodivergency and that some people, their brains just think different and their bodies process senses different. Just like how you were saying with like being hyperactive and then being around other kids and like seeing how like they're so hyperactive. It's normal for kids to act like that anyway, but for some kids, it's literally a thing like they can't control it, like they can't regulate. And so it's like, are they being disrespectful, or do they just need help with the support to understand, all right, we don't move our body like that during church, but I can take you outside and you can move your body like that outside. So it's different support systems that we can offer to help them understand. I just feel like there's a way to discipline them without always automatically going into, oh, I'm going to yell at you, I'm going to hit you, you know, you're going to listen to me, I'm going to control you.
After a little bit, it's just going to go out one ear, out the other, and they're just not going to really pay attention.
And it affects the relationship that they have with you as a parent. And then when they get older, they don't want that relationship with you anymore. And then parents wonder, why? I did everything for you. Like, why? Why don't you care about connecting with me?
That's the hard part too, when you have a child and you have the mom and dad, like the couple, where they both don't agree into how to discipline a child, because one is saying, no, you don't understand that there's a reason why they're acting out this way, and the other one's like, well, just whip them. What is so hard about whipping this child? And so that confusion adds to what the child is already going through, doesn't really help a person. And so, I wanted to ask in regards to how you mentioned earlier, you started to do content because you wanted your family to see and understand what you were going through, and understand and pretty much educating them about, your daughter's diagnosis, so that they can be aware of the situation. Tell me about the pushback in all of this.
Yeah, the pushback has been very difficult. I think, okay, well, I have a very long story to tell you guys, so I hope you get yourselves comfortable. So, speaking about TikTok, right? So, I think at first it was really hard because there was a first pushback from my family, and then them just feeling like, oh my gosh, you're exposing us and you're going against everything that we've ever taught you. They saw it as super disrespectful, right? And I when creating content, I always try to be very careful not to share too many private experiences or anything like that. I tried to just generalize things specifically to my daughter and the behaviors that she had, and how it doesn't always fit like cultural context. But yeah, my family was not happy about it. And so I think just what helped me was, over time, I started connecting with others that were going through similar things. And these are other Pacifica people that are experiencing the same things that I was experiencing. They're confused. They feel unsupported. They're navigating systems that don't quite fit their reality. They're experiencing late diagnoses, or like what we talked about, they're being their children are being punished for things that are just neurological, or like they're just trauma responses, which is not things that they can control, right? And so it's not fair to discipline them for something like that. And so as I'm going along and I'm connecting with these other individuals, it just inspired me so much. And I was like, wow, this is not an isolated experience for me. I started recognizing this is a pattern that is happening in multiple families across multiple communities. And it's not just here in America. I was connecting with people internationally, people from New Zealand, there's also people from other islands that are reaching out to me, from the Polynesian islands and the Micronesian islands, and they're explaining experiences that they've had that are so similar. And I'm just like, wow. And so I think that triggered me to want to do more research on data. Like, what does the data look like for people, and why is this never talked about? Because like I mentioned, like for me growing up, I never knew about any of this stuff. My parents never taught me any of this. The only things that I learned were from my own experiences and my own education. And so then as I'm digging into the research, I'm finding our people have high rates of suicide. This is not an American thing. This is global. This is all across the board. And that's when the pushback started to kind of get bigger, because then I started sharing this information, right? All the things that I'm learning. And it's becoming more than just about me and my daughter. It's becoming about the experiences that everybody else is having as well, and how they're so similar. And so people are pushing back on that, telling me, oh, that's an American thing. You don't know anything. You're so palangi. You don't know anything about our culture, blah, 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 whatever, like all this stuff, and they start feeling attacked, because this feels like a direct attack to their identity, to their peers, like how they grew up. I'm starting to find data on untreated trauma and how high that is across the board for our people as well. There's the underdiagnosed neurodivergencies. We're starting to see signs across the board that there are many of us who are neurodivergent, but we don't know. We don't know it, and we don't get evaluated. We don't invest money into healthcare services, nothing like that. And so then I started learning more about the financial barriers, or like the community barriers that we face as well. And so the community barriers are things like the financial aspect. So for one, our people don't want to invest money, but then for two, majority of us live in high poverty situations. And so it's also like we just can't afford to pay for healthcare. There is limited representation in professionals in the field. And so that's also causing a lack of us being educated on these topics, because there's not very many people who understand us culturally and then can also teach us about the clinical or medical knowledge that is out there on mental health, right? And then there's also limited access to research. So there's not really a lot of data being done specifically on our people. And when it comes to systems that do collect data, a lot of times we are grouped with Asian communities. So we love our Asian brothers and sisters, right? They have a lot of experiences that are very similar to ours, but there's also a lot of pushback on being grouped with them from different communities, just because if we look at the Asian population, they're huge, right? They're one of the biggest populations in the whole world. And so we're being grouped with them. We're one of the smallest populations in the whole world. And so it's like we don't have accurate data that represents us. And we don't really have our foot in the door with being recognized in these systems like worldwide. And so then that affects us having limited access to campaigns and education, right? Different initiatives, especially out on the islands. And it's not to say that people are not working on this. We do see a lot of our people reaching excellence, right? So there are people in our communities that are becoming doctors, and they're becoming therapists, and they're doing nursing, and they're doing all these other things too. Like they're working in real estate, and they're being lawyers, and they're amazing. Like they're doing amazing things. But then that's why there's a gap for us and for our people, because they're doing amazing things, and maybe they are contributing to research and the work, but it's only on the clinical side. And it's only the medical side. And then when we look at our communities, we're seeing that our communities are experiencing something totally different compared to what the systems see in the data, right? So the data, or the medical systems and the clinical systems are showing us there's education, there's services available, there's resources. But in the community area, it's like, well, we're facing all these barriers, we can't even access that stuff. And then we also, we're not even, educated on it. So our lived experiences are a lack of support, a lack of representation, high mental health issues, high suicide rates, right? And so we have a portion in our community where, we're really strong on Indigenous practices, but we do not acknowledge the clinical and medical knowledge that is out there. And so there's a gap between the two, right? And the thing is that with our people reaching excellence, even though they're doing work, there's not many resources or organizations that are helping to connect the two, where our communities can acknowledge the clinical and medical knowledge, but then also systems can acknowledge our people and who we are and our Indigenous practices, and how we can have mental health supports that don't take away from our own lived experiences. Anyway, so it was a lot, right? I'm learning all this stuff, and I'm just so mind blown. This is too big to ignore. It's just so much, and it just becomes personal to me, because not only of my own lived experience with my daughter, but me having this deep connection to my roots and to wanting to do something about it, and to not just sit back and continue to see our people suffer in silence, and continue to see families who have these horrible experiences, and younger generations growing up just not having enough acknowledgement and enough support the way that they deserve, you know? And so I don't know, from there, that's where I transitioned into creating my organization, United Minds. And that's what my mission and my platform is about. It's being able to create a service where communities will have access to affordable healthcare. They will have access to education and campaigns on mental health. And it's also to collect ongoing data. So basically, the way that my platform works, United Minds is a hub, right? And the hub is where professionals pay a subscription to come and be in the hub, and they get access to culturally safe care or culturally sound training so that they can offer culturally safe care to clients. And then they also agree to participate in data. So when they get clients that come in, they're taking data, de-identified data on their experiences. So they're not sharing anything personal like their name or where they live or anything like that. It's more of them collecting data on, okay, did they ever have therapy before in the past? Are they neurodivergent, and did they know that they were neurodivergent? What are signs about them having untreated trauma? What was it like for them growing up? Just different things like that, contributing to all these other barriers, right, that I talked about before in the past. So providers are contributing to that data. And then that's how United Minds just keeps the providers there. The thing about United Minds, it is a for-profit, so it does make money, right? I didn't have a team to support me in creating a nonprofit organization, so that's why I have a for-profit, because I can run it by myself. But the thing is that being a for-profit, it doesn't always gain the trust of the community. And my mission is all about the community. Like, I'm not trying to exploit our people or make money off of them or anything like that, which is why the subscription is only for the providers. And so what United Minds does is I partner up with nonprofit organizations who can offer scholarships and sliding scales and affordability for the services that they're coming in and getting. So basically the community comes in and they shop on the hub. So it's kind of like Psychology Today, if anybody has ever heard of that. And they just kind of look for a professional that they feel like, all right, like this is the person that I want to see and they fit my need and my journey, and I'm going to go for that one. And then I apply to a scholarship. And whatever sister affiliate we have, they're going to go through the application. If they approve it, then they provide the money and the services so that they can have access to it. So that's basically the system network, that how it works out. And then alongside that, what I'm doing on the side is I'm also contributing to data by doing interviews. And so the interviews that I do and that I post on social media, these are lived experiences from our people. And so the lived experiences are things like experiences with suicide, men's mental health, people who are experiencing autism in their family, navigating ADHD, untreated trauma, all these different things, right? And so everything that we're collecting, the data goes into this database system for United Minds. Why this is important is because all of this information helps systems recognize us, so that we have evidence to provide to them and tell them, hey, this is a high need in our community. This isn't an opinion. This is evidence-based, and we need to put in support systems to help our people. The mission and everything that United Minds does and that it's kind of set up for. And so I think one thing that I think about a lot is the scientific method and just how that process has supported my entire journey. So when we look at the scientific method, there's 4 steps to it. So the first step is observation. In my lived experience, what I went through with my daughter, and then also observing all these other patterns happening in the communities, that was the observation step. The second step is coming up with a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is like a theory or something that you want to test out and see if it's like valid or true. And so my hypothesis is that after seeing all this data, I believe that they're linked. I believe that our people face untreated trauma, they face undiagnosed neurodivergency, and based off of certain parenting approaches, because of these things, they're linked together and they're affecting the high rates of suicide across our communities. And so after you have a hypothesis, you have to test it, right? So that's what United Minds is doing with the hub. We're collecting all this data to test this theory and provide evidence to say, hey, this is either true or this is not true. And as of right now, even though we're still building, a lot of the evidence we're collecting is already pointing towards, yes, like this is a thing. I'm not ready to share the actual findings yet because we still have so much work to do to be able to collect data and actually say like, oh, this is the conclusion that we've come to. But that would be the 4th step, is just sharing the results, right? And so that's why this is just, it's so important to be able to continue on with this, spread awareness about this, because I think a hard part is that a lot of people don't realize that their lived experience is data, and they need to speak up and share their experiences so that we can show like, hey, this is an actual need that we have. And there are people out there that are willing to support us. We just have to show them, like, this is what's happening to us.
You know what I was thinking about the whole time when you're talking was what took me back was when you started talking about the diagnosis and things that we didn't really realize about within our own people. I was thinking back to a book that I read in Kramer, and I keep going back to Kramer. I was talking with Crystal. So just a little bit of Kramer. Kramer is this white man that came. Yeah, you should read the book. It's so cool. And so, you know, like we talked about, there's a lot of things about our culture where, you know, with oral interpretation, nothing was ever written down. And so we have in Kramer's book a lot of stories about our people, and he wrote down stories that were shared from, you know, those that he had interviewed, similar to what you're doing with United Minds is interviewing different people and talking about, but this time they're talking about the eternal part of within themselves, whereas as in Kramer they're talking about the overall, the surface level, you know, the tribes and so and so. But one thing that that stood out to me was when they talked about the missionaries that came to Samoa, and there was just wars going on with one tribe and another, and people are just killing each other like it's like they're going out there to kill chicken to eat for dinner that night. And it was like no emotional connection. And so when missionaries came and shared the gospel, they didn't understand what it was that was burning inside of them, that was changing them. And so when they start to feel that, they realized that what they did was not only did they kill somebody, they killed a family member that was in a different tribe that's connected to them. And so they realized, well, they killed legacy, right? And now they start to connect. There's an emotional connection to that. And so they hated the way that they were, that they converted to Christianity, because they loved that new feeling that they felt. It was almost like that Christianity was a drug to them. To change that, and I don't know if if you could call that neurodivergent, because they didn't realize that what they were doing was bad. It was just a normal thing. And so when they were introduced to Christianity, that was the drug that changed them to open up their eyes, that they now stopped killing. They now stopped doing things that was just completely of the darkness and evil. So that's what I thought about when you were discussing all of this. I'm like, wow. Can you imagine now in this modern day, we are now able to use technology to have our people talk and share. Now that they're sharing, we're able to become open and comfortable. Wow, this person went through this, that person went through that. I am not alone, and I'm not going to be afraid, because I feel like for you, Mele, opening up your content and sharing what you're doing, not a lot of us is able to create this organization to bring it in the forefront, to say, hey, I acknowledge that this is going on, and I'm here, you're not alone, and I want you to know that it's okay to talk about it. And I want you to tell me, what was it as you were going through these things, what was it that didn't work for you, that you're able to figure out later, that was very complicated for you to figure out on your own?
I think a lot of things. I think there's just always so many challenges with something like this, especially because it's something so new across the board for our communities. It's not like I have one person as a mentor that I could just turn to and be like, hey, how did you do it? And like, what worked for you and how can I improve myself, right? Like, this is so new that the only person I have to rely on is really God. Sorry, I feel like he's the one who directs the path. He inspires the knowledge that I receive, and he provides for me every step of the way for me to be able to succeed in this. One thing that I was thinking of, Leaso, as you were like sharing the story of these people changing and converting, I was thinking of the health circle. So I don't think this is taught enough either, but the health circle consists of 6 different spheres, right? So a lot of people, when they think of health, they really only think of physical or they think of mental. That's it. But the health circle has 6 portions to it. So we have our mental health, our physical health, we have spiritual health, environmental health, we have financial health. I always forget what the last one is. I think it's like education or something. I don't know. I forgot what the last one is. I'll have to share that at another point. But anyway, the point of me saying this is that everything is interlinked. Everything. And so if one part of our health circle declines, it affects another part of the health circle. And so an example of that is like if my mental health is declining, it could be I could get physically ill, right? Or vice versa. If I'm physically ill, it could make me depressed and anxious and I can't really do much for myself, right? And so the biggest thing that I see and that I believe is that because we have high rates of mental health decline in our communities, it's affecting our spirituality and our ability to connect with God and with ourselves. And that's why I feel like this is a mission ordained to me from God. Because in a way, it's like a mission to help bring our people to connect back to Him again. And what's helped me through the challenges is that because we are a very spiritual people, when I was younger, I had a revelation that I would be a part of a very important work that not many people would know about and not many people would understand. And I've lived much of my life trying to figure out, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? What is that? Like, why did I receive that revelation? And so being where I am now, it's me seeing that this is not very many of our people understand this. Not very many of our people know about this. And I feel like that's why even though many challenges and obstacles come into play, there's always a solution, there's always provision, because I believe it's from God and He opens doors for me that I couldn't ever have done on my own. And so some of those doors look like, for one, getting through the pushback, right? So me receiving a lot of pushback on this, a lot of the things that I will hear, like I mentioned before, people want to discredit my credibility. Like, you're not a professional, you don't have a degree, you don't know the culture, you're American, you're this, you're that, you're speaking from opinion, your own experience, all that stuff, right? And so over time, it's me learning and remembering, like, this mission is more than the petty comments. And so when I reply or when I respond, it's me coming from a place of trying to stay respectful and trying to understand people making those comments. They're not in a place to receive this knowledge yet. And everybody's journey looks different, right? And it's going to take a lot of work for our people to get to a place where they are open and they are willing to learn and they do want to make changes. But it's expected to get pushback because this is new for many of us. And it's uncomfortable because it challenges what's normal and what they've grown up with to be acceptable. So then it feels like it's an attack on them. You're saying all this stuff, then that means that I didn't have a healthy childhood, my parents didn't love me, all this stuff, right? And like, that's just a normal thing to start to wonder and to start to question. And that's why people get defensive. And so I'm trying to come from a place of understanding, like, I know, like, that's not my intention, but like, I understand what's happening,
And because there's so much unhealed trauma, not just with our generation, but the generation before us. I mean, it's from generation to generation. I think we discussed this in one of the past podcasts that we've had, but trauma, it's from your ancestors. It's from one generation to the next generation. It's because that is what they know. It's not that, it's not that it's their fault, that the reasons why they repeat the same trauma. But it's from what they know, from what they learned from their parents, and their parents taught it to them, and then so they think it's normal. They don't think it's not normal. So then when they hear or see these kinds of things, or safe places, what I would say, they would probably steer away from it, because number one, the name, we had talked about this in the last podcast. Your name is something so valuable in our culture, and like a lot of our older generation, they don't want to tarnish the name because it's so important, because it links them to to royalty, or to, a high status family, or whatever it is. Or, they just don't want to tarnish their name because they've been in good standing for all these years. And for people to hear, oh, that, someone has autism, or someone is dealing with, neurodivergent, it's like, oh my gosh, my family is not functional, or, they're dysfunctional, but they don't understand that is normal. We just gotta, break through. And I think the educational part is super important to help teach those that really need it, so that way they can heal their trauma.
and not only heal their trauma, they're going to heal generations thereafter. I really feel like this generation, our generation, the next generation thereafter, are really going to start to heal the trauma from their past. And I feel like this is what's needed for the people and for them to hear this, because I'm pretty sure there's somebody, like it said, people are messaging you from all over the world and saying, this is new to me, this is something familiar in our family, we need your help. And that's good news for you. That's really good news, because even if you don't have a degree, it's not anything to where you need it. You have the right people in place. You have the professionals in place that's helping you with gathering this information to help others. And it's because of your situation and what you've gone through is why you're so passionate about, what you're doing. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for doing this for not just only our Polynesian people, but for people around the world that really need to hear this and to not feel like ashamed and feel like a sense of normalcy in their livelihood, and that they can express themselves, because a lot of the times we cannot express ourselves in our families. At least with me, I couldn't really express myself with my mom. We didn't have that kind of relationship. And so it was until later on is when I could really tell her things. But before, it was just like, do what I say whenever I say, and that's just how it is. And so, I love that, what you just expressed. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And I wanted to also recognize that with the pushback, our people are very critical. And so it's, even though the work is good, there's always going to be like, what can I see to find out about this person and discredit her from the good work that she does. And there are so many successful people, scientists, that are in just so many different genres that they're in. And we look back at the farmers. You go back to the island and you bring all these scientists that come over there and talk about, no, you're not supposed to plant it that way. But then the farmer that's been doing this since they were little could tell you, just by looking up to the sky, tasting the air and feeling the soil, and say, no, this is the spot. I know this because I've done this for so long. If you get your hands dirty, you will understand it very well, how it works, how it feels, smells, tastes, everything. Versus someone whose head is in the book all day and haven't touched the soil. There's a big difference. And so I always say that too, like, my kids and everyone else that I talk to, I can be very book smart, but when I apply that into my work, it means nothing until I learn years and years and years later of going through understanding accounting that, oh, wow, this is way different from textbook. It's the fundamentals I've learned in elementary and all that stuff in high school. And then coming to the work field, it was my way to get in the door into this field. I didn't understand anything. I had to learn from the beginning of what it meant. And so getting myself dirty and understanding the aspects of accounting, and that's no different from the work that you do. And so when people discredit or try to discredit you for what you're trying to accomplish, they're not open-minded to see the work and the value that you put out there for people. And so I wanted to ask you in regards to
Shake, silent fever, wave riders, lava rivers, no distance.